everybody, and welcome to The View from the Top. We are live for an exciting episode. Today we are going to celebrate innovation. How exciting is that? Last year, the very back end of last year, we pulled together our top 100 innovators. And today we're going to be talking about innovation. And we've got not one, but we've got two innovators with us. How exciting. That is wonderful. We've got all the latest immigration news, and we've got the wonderful Julia Onslow-Cole to talk about immigration. And today, for the very first time, we have Julie Barron, who is our new resident tax guru, who's going to be giving us our regular tax update. So it's all very, very exciting stuff that we've got coming up for you. So let's see who's coming in. We've got people from around the world joining us, so it's great to see. I can see Valerie McKenzie from Houston. We got Sylvia Ehrlich from New York. We've got Russ from Atlanta. We've got Jamie from Chicago. We've got people coming over from all over the world, which is just wonderful. So let's move on. We've got a lot to talk about today. So what I really want to do, I want to start off by just telling you a little bit of breaking news. What's been going on from around the wonderful world of global mobility? Let's have a look what's been going on in the last 7 days in the world of global mobility. Our breaking news, which is just wonderful, but you know how it works, everybody. If you want to tell the world that you're here, join in the conversation, write in the comments box. The only way that we know that you're out there is having there. I see Sue Kukadia, I saw in the audience, and congratulations on your promotion to partner. Big shout out to Sue and everything that you've achieved at Mazars. And also this wonderful show, you get CPE credits. So if you want your CPE credits, we've got credits from HRCI, we've got credits from SHRM, and of course, we've got credits from Worldwide ERC. So many thanks to our friends at Rocket Mortgage who get the credits for HRCI and SHRM to us, and of course to our great friends at Worldwide ERC for giving us the GMS and the CRP credits. Next week, we've got a wonderful show for you in a really topical issue. Next week, we're going to be talking about global mobility in a cost-conscious world. Because let's face it, this is a world now where people are looking at things maybe a little bit more carefully than they were a while ago. There's a lot of focus on cost. Unfortunately, there's also been a fair number of layoffs going on in the world, especially in the tech sector. So we're going to be looking about what you can do for global mobility when you are actually in that cost-conscious world. But without further ado, I want to move on one stage further and move on to start talking about immigration. So let's bring on to the show the one and only, the legend, Julia Onslow-Cole.
Brian. Hi.
Okay, now you're somewhere different, are you? I mean, I think last time you were on the show, you were at home in Winchester, but that doesn't look like Winchester. So where are you today?
So today I'm in San Francisco and I'm in the US for 3 weeks. In fact, I'm going from San Francisco to Washington at the weekend. So I hope to have a cup of tea with Julie. and then I'm going to New York and Miami.
Okay, so you're in San Francisco. So are you going to give us a bit of a West Coast theme to the show today?
Yes, exactly. So I want to say thank you very much to my partner, Chad Ellsworth. So he's the senior partner of the Bay Area. And I wanted to really tackle today some of the immigration issues that we're seeing in the Bay Area. And obviously, you know, one of the big themes here is the redundancies, particularly that are happening in the tech companies. And we're seeing a lot of that here. The good news is that...
so to make sure I understand this, Julie, just make sure to everybody, these are not issues that are specific to the Bay Area. These are issues that, if you like, you've got a Bay Area focus, but obviously this applies US-wide. Yeah,
absolutely. As obviously it applies US-wide, but what we're seeing it more prevalent in the Bay Area because of the numbers of tech companies here. But, you know, the good news is that the crisis is very unlike the financial crisis when unemployment in the US was about 12%. You know, currently it's only 3.5% and even lower in California. So a lot of the people that are being laid off actually get really good jobs. And a lot of our SME clients are really pleased that they're getting some foreign talent that maybe they wouldn't otherwise have access to. But nevertheless, for those people who are on a non-immigrant visa like H-1Bs, you know, it's very difficult for them because the law's quite brutal and they only have 60 days to file another visa application. So there's a lot of discussion about when that 60-day period runs for. And even if they have garden leave, it's not enough just to be on garden leave. You have to be earning compensation and you have to be engaging in activities. So those two elements have to happen. So if, for example, you're really actively helping with your transition of your job, then and you're being paid and you're on garden leave, your 60 days doesn't start running. But if you're only just being paid and you're not doing anything with the organization, the 60 days does start running.
So if you're in a situation where maybe you're going to a competitor, so they're still paying you, but they're not letting you do anything.
Then if you're going to a competitor, and that's fine because you can file your new application. It's for people who are really looking for a job where the 60 days.
Okay, so the layoffs, yeah.
So, you know, obviously it's devastating because 60 days is not very long and you might have children in school, you might have a planned surgery, you have a house to sell. So you can apply for a tourist visa for 6 months. And if it's your first application and you show that you've got enough resources, then, you know, you should be granted a tourist visa. But those visas are taking almost the whole 6 months to actually come through. And by that time, you may have already left, in which case your visa might be denied for abandonment, but that's fine because you applied for it in time. Or the difficult situation is maybe after you filed your visitor visa application and before you have a resolution of that, you find another job. But then in that case, if your visitor visa isn't resolved, you have to leave and you have to come back in. And the difficulty with that is we've talked before of the terrible queues at the US consulates overseas. So that is a really a nightmare situation too.
Okay, now, I'll just come in here, Julie. Just two questions that have come in. The first from our old friend, Pat Jurgens. Not so much a question. He says, better define what garden leave means, not a familiar US term. And the second is from, I think it's from Mena, who says, how will they be tracking it anyway?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think the Department of Labour does have really good eyes on this. They do have very good eyes on this. Garden leave is a term, you know, which is quite prevalent in the UK, where you are still contractually employed, but you're not actively working. But what I'm trying to draw the distinction in the US is that you cannot just be on garden leave. You actually also have to be doing something active towards your contract of employment. But another thing that I want to really highlight about the redundancies is the impact this has on companies' green card programs for their employees. And if you apply for a green card for an employer employee, you have to do a labor market test, and you have to attest that there are no US workers that could fill that position. Now, the difficulty employers have is that if they've done a lot of layoffs, it might be very difficult for them to give that kind of attestation. Now, what we're seeing, it's not obviously across the board, but what we're seeing generally in tech companies is that the layoffs are in certain departments like recruitment, talent acquisition, basic engineering, marketing. So companies could potentially genuinely attest that there's still labor market shortages and no US worker could do the job in very bespoke categories, such as, very difficult AI matters. But companies have to assess their situation very, very carefully, because it's very difficult if they actually breach these requirements. And they have to say, do we keep filing for green cards, or should we just pause the whole program? And the difficulty you have is with disgruntled US workers who might see these advertisements and they might say, well, why is the company still advertising when I've just been laid off? And companies, if they carry on with their green card program, they have to show that the jobs that they're filling are substantially different from the areas where they're laying off people. So there are severe penalties if they get this wrong. And this happens. So it's not something theoretical, but the Department of Labor are looking at media reports, so they do understand what's going on. And they could say, right, we'll have an audit of the company. And then they could put the company under supervised recruitment, which means that everything that they do in recruitment is scrutinized. And they could say, well, you can't file any labor certificates, and that's what you would need to support most people's green cards. Yeah. The impact of this is that your foreign nationals might leave your company, or they won't join if they get wind of if they get wind of supervised recruitment. And the final thing I wanted to say, just 2 seconds, is that in another big topic in the Bay Area, particularly, but obviously it applies across the whole of the US, is wage transparency. This is a huge issue. So, you have to advertise a job, and it has to be at the prevailing wage. But there are local laws, so like laws in New York City, laws in Colorado, they conflict with the federal labor laws, and they might conflict with your own laws. So you must get legal advice about this, and you must be able to defend the wage that you put up.
Okay, so Julia, amazing update on a really difficult subject, but many, many thanks. And thanks for that comment, Nicola. Behold and listen. This is why you should always do corporate immigration with qualified lawyers and experienced consultants. Not easy at all, as some people think it may be. So great comment there, Nicola, and thank you again for your help, Julia. So now we're going to bring on, for the very first time, our new tax guru, taking over from Pat Jurgens. We have Julie Barron. So everybody, and we've got a wonderful walk-up video for Julie. So everybody, you know how it works, and especially today as we welcome Julie to the stage for her very, very first time. Please hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say cheerio to Julie Onslow-Cole, and welcome to the very, very first time to Julie Barron. Hey, how are you?
Fine, thank you, Brian. I feel very inspired by my video of me as a knight.
Excellent. I don't know if mine just went a bit funny there. Hopefully it didn't for everybody else. I think maybe it's just my end.
Yeah.
Went a bit funny. Anyway, Julie, so great to have you on the show. That's just wonderful. So tell us, Julie, obviously a lot of people out there know you and love you in the audience, but tell us a bit about yourself. What's your background? How did you get into this game, and where do you live?
So I live in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. It's been my home for many years, but I can give you a little lowdown of my career. I started many, many years ago with Coopers and Lybrand. So that tells you how old I am. It's been over 30 years. And I was in Richmond, Virginia, which is near
I
where
hate
I
to
grew
tell
up.
you this, but I started my career with Coopers and Lybrand too.
Yeah. And then I was in London actually for 3 years. So I was an expatriate myself, and enjoyed living in London and all the travel. Then I moved to our office in Stamford, Connecticut. So I dealt with a lot of the New York Metro clients. And 11 or 12 years ago, I moved here to be in the Washington metropolitan area and love it here, a little closer to home. Interesting clients here and lots of different topics here in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And I have some responsibilities at Vialto for knowledge and learning and development and all of those kind of things. So I'm excited to be here, but I know big shoes to fill from Pat.
Absolutely. And Julie, I mean, I've got to ask you, of course, you're with Vialto, but you grew up in PwC.
Yeah.
So what's it been like, the transition? I know you had your big conference just last week. So
We
tell me all about it.
did. We had our inaugural conference in Las Vegas, of all places. Thankfully, I don't think we lost anyone in Vegas. I don't think anyone gambled too much. I don't think. There was a comment from one of our leaders saying he thought we had more people in the sessions than we usually do, which we were surprised at, being that we were in Vegas. So nobody got too distracted that they didn't show up for the sessions. But it was a great hotel. We were at the Wynn. Great food, lots of energy. Everybody was excited, I think, to be together after a few years. So it was a great conference. And thank you to everybody who came. I know that some of the people on this call were there at the conference, but we really had a great time.
Okay, so Julie, let's move on. Let's just talk a little bit about tax. That's why you're here. You are the tax baron.
Yes.
You now have the name. It's going to stick.
I'm wondering what Julia's nickname is, though. I don't think she had one.
We'll work on that.
Okay.
I think she's just the legend.
She's the legend. Okay.
Absolutely. But Julie, anyway, so where in the world are we going? What are we going to be talking about today?
Today I'm going to talk about the jurisdiction that I know best, the U.S. I'm just going to talk about an interesting case that's going on in the US and something that has kind of piqued our attention in the mobility world and that we are following. And just so you guys know, as we do this session, I know Pat would do the updates every time. I'm going to do the updates every time, but sometimes I might bring on my own little guest stars. So if I have an update from another country where I feel that someone would want to come on and talk, I'll do that. So we might run the format a little bit differently than Pat did. So the topic I wanted to talk about today is the Bittner case. And for the first time in my knowledge, we actually have a case related to global mobility that is being heard by the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court of the US is looking at this case called the Bittner case. Mr. Bittner was a Romanian American who lived and worked in Romania and built some wealth in Romania.
So he was Romanian, but naturalized US citizen.
That's right. He was a US citizen. He has been doing his tax returns, but unbeknownst to his accountant, he had an obligation to file his FBARs. So he needed to report all of his foreign bank accounts. And he did not, and his accountant did not know that he had to do that. So there was, he went to court with the IRS. He was fined $50,000, which was $10,000 for each of the years that he did not file these forms. It was 272 accounts that he did not properly report. So a circuit court, the Fifth Circuit Court, looked at the case and said, no, 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 no. It shouldn't be $10,000 per year that you didn't file this form properly. It should be $2.72 million because you didn't report 272 accounts. So they were filing.
Is that 272 accounts or 27 accounts over 10 years or something like that?
Yeah. So it's $10,000 per account. Is what they were gonna. Yeah. So they were finding him
pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, it adds up, right? I mean, when you have a lot of accounts, and he wasn't someone who has been deemed to be willful, right? Because there's two different types of penalties. You can have willful and non-willful. And the penalty for a willful violation is much larger than non-willful. So anyway, so the Supreme Court has been hearing this case because he's arguing that the $50,000 is a much more reasonable penalty, which would be $10,000 per form that he didn't file rather than per account. And so we've been watching what is the Supreme Court thinking about this. And it does seem to be that they may be leaning toward only the $50,000 penalty, not the 2.72. But it'll be very interesting and obviously very relevant to some of our clients. This is something that as tax preparers, we are always warning people about. Please report these assets. Do not fall afoul of these rules. It can be quite expensive. And this is why. So he could be on the hook for $2.72 million. And really, he did not do it on purpose. He just did not know the rules, and neither did his accountant. So interesting. We'll give an update on this when the Bittner case is declared by the Supreme Court, but we'll see.
And do these fines apply even if the account doesn't have very much money in them?
So you have to report anything anytime you have over $10,000 in aggregate in your foreign account. So if you have $5 in an account, you have to report that if you have another account that say has $20,000 in it.
So it's
it's
perfectly feasible that the fine that he's facing is more than the money he counts in the first place.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, it's interesting to us here in the US. We think it's interesting to have something before the Supreme Court that affects us, not something that has been happening in mobility before. So very exciting.
Okay. Well, Julie, thank you very much. You've acquitted yourself admirably on your first show. We'll let you come back.
Well, thank you.
We'll ask the audience, has she passed probation? Yeah, we're getting yes. So everybody,
Okay.
You know how it works. Hit the heart, hit the like button. I'm actually going to bring Tally onto the show now. Let's bring Tally on. And we're going to say goodbye to you, Julie. So
Okay.
many thanks, Julie, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
Hi,
So
Brian. Julie did great. That was a really wonderful first time for her. I don't know if I really believe that American citizens don't know about having to file the forms, but if he can prove that's good. I want to share something today really quick, something that we found in the last week, and that's a new addition to LinkedIn, which I'm not sure everyone is aware of. So let me just share my slide.
This is something which applies not just to the show, not just to me. This is something that applies to anybody who uses LinkedIn. So this is a real cool tip we found out about LinkedIn that only came into effect in the last month or so.
And that's the ring the bell in LinkedIn. So you can check LinkedIn, and if you have contacts that you're really interested in their material, in things that they post, and we actually have two really interesting innovators. One of them, you're going to talk to him about all the articles he's placing. Then I would ring his bell. But definitely, if you ring the bell, you're going to get notified of every post that contact is posting, and it's really important. The reason that I'm bringing it up here is because, and I'm bringing Brian's profile, is because Brian is always inviting in his post to this show. So he's putting the invitation, and if you want to be sure that you're not missing the show, the invites, the information about what we're going to talk about in the show, be sure to ring Brian's bell, and you're going to get notified.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Tally. So that's one way to overcome the. Let's take that off screen. That's one way to overcome the LinkedIn algorithm that tells you what you got to see. If you want to choose what you want to see, choose your favorite people out there. You might want to choose Julia or Julie or hopefully me or Arjun or Tessa or anybody else. If you ring their bell, then you will get their update. So it's a cool little trick that LinkedIn has introduced. Anyway, we're now going to go on to meet two of our innovators. And as I've said, we've got Arjun Jonnalagadda and we've got Tessa Boone. Arjun's from Baker Hughes, Tessa is from Ford, and we're going to be talking innovation. So let's bring them on stage. So here we are, Tessa, Arjun, so great to have you here. Hopefully you've enjoyed your time in the green room, watching the show backstage, but this is your moment of glory. And we're talking innovation. We ran the top 100 list the back end of last year. And well, we had 100 people obviously on our list. And we've got two of you today. We've got Tessa from Ford and Arjun. So ladies first, Tessa, tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us how you got into this game.
Oh my goodness. So everyone has a wonderful falling into mobility story. So I was actually a trailing spouse. Isn't that a horrible term, Brian? That's just a horrible thing, isn't it? But I met my husband at BMW, and he was assigned as an expat.
A bit of a car thing going on here then.
Yes. Oh yes. I'm definitely I'm a car enthusiast, absolutely. So he was assigned as an expat to Munich, and I accompanied. And when we came back to the United States, there was an opportunity in what they called international HR. And so they thought, well, she speaks German, she's been abroad, so we'll put her in there. And that's how I started many moons ago. And I've been now with Ford for 8 years in this sort of global role, which I love.
For what, about 20 years or so, is it? Or
Ish, yeah.
Ish.
I don't want to date myself, Brian, but
I
yes,
know,
approximately.
Yes, I know my manners, but
yeah,
you're very experienced. So we'll leave it at that.
Seasoned, I like to say, absolutely.
Okay. So you now head up the program at Ford, and that's a pretty exciting program. So let's just bring Arjun into the conversation. Arjun, tell us a bit about your background.
Sure. So I was fortunate enough to start my career with Deloitte. That's what has shaped me, like who I am. I spent like 8 years there, and then Baker Hughes happened. So I think one of them that's fortunate enough to see.
Hang on. What do you mean Baker Hughes happened? Things don't just happen. Tell us about that transition. Because you started off in Hyderabad, didn't you?
Yes. So that's where I was born and raised and spent all of my career and life in until that point. And one of our acquaintances offered me a role within Baker Hughes and saw if I was interested to, at that time, implement the technology for Baker Hughes. So I took that plunge, and I'm really pleased in hindsight that I did that. And I'm also pleased to be one of them that has seen the mobility world from two sides, one from a big four consulting side and from the in-house corporate mobility. So,
okay. And I suspect I'm sure everybody knows Ford, and I suspect most people know Baker Hughes. But for those who don't, tell us a bit about Baker Hughes and the program that you have there.
Yep. So we are an energy technology company. Half of our company focuses on oil and gas extraction, helps companies like ExxonMobil, Shell, and all the top energy companies to drill oil and gas. The second half of the company is focused on new energies or emerging energies like hydrogen, geothermal.
Oh, look at
all
this
the
from
clean energy.
Daniel Caitland. We are very happy you did, Arjun. Presumably a colleague at Baker Hughes.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so tell us about the program at Baker Hughes.
So ours, I would say, is a fairly large mobilization program. We mobilize anywhere between 1,000 to 1,500 people within a year, depending on which year you're talking about, excluding all the short-term business traveler program. And then I would say our program is pretty robust. And also, because Baker Hughes has come together with GE a few years ago, we have the best of both worlds and the best brains from both worlds. So yeah, really pleased with how our program has come along.
Excellent. Now, Tessa, tell us about the Ford program, because that's, to me, Ford is sort of, a classic US icon of a company, and I imagine it being or having been a very classical program, but prove me wrong. Tell me about the program.
You're not wrong, Brian. It is very traditional. So we have your traditional expat assignments, just over 300 or so, which is sort of that round trip, temporary kind of assignment. We also see one-way international movement, maybe approximately 100 of those a year or so. And then we also have, domestic movement in certain countries, the US, Canada, and the UK, that we have responsibility for. And then there's other domestic movement that's happening at Ford. It's just not something that talent mobility is governing. And so it is pretty traditional programs.
Okay. Now, I know we were chatting earlier, and you said that when you joined, the program was much larger and it has changed considerably over the years. Tell us a bit about that, because I think that is quite illuminating for many people.
Yes. So very, when I started 8 years ago, very traditional sort of automotive kind of, location of the populations and the types of people that were, because I came from BMW, very similar. So there was about 1,500 expats out in the world for Ford.
Has gone down to, you said, about
just over 300. Yeah, just over 300. So
yeah, so that's
and the types of assignments that we're seeing are different. Much more senior folks that are going. It is a lot more purposeful, a lot more thoughtful, I believe, in candidate selection and assignment purpose. And then there's also some alternatives that people are looking for, different types of assignments, not always that traditional long-term assignment. We're seeing a bit more short-term assignments. We're seeing a lot more business travelers, which is also something that we are governing from a compliance perspective.
So tell us a bit about that, because I know you've done a lot of work on business travelers.
Yes, so business traveler is something that we are very proud of. We have launched a solution together with our relocation management company with Weikert Workforce Mobility, and it's called Smart Trip. And we've launched this for targeted populations to ensure immigration and tax compliance. And now we are about to roll it out enterprise-wide, globally, for all travelers. So real excited about that. It is very new, I think, in this space, and one of the reasons why I'm here talking with you today.
I think it's really interesting because there's a question always of where mobility sits and what mobility does, but business travel seems to be coming, either into the sphere of mobility or the two are working hand in glove. I mean, how do you work with business travel at Ford?
Yeah, so the talent mobility team at Ford includes travel. So corporate travel is part of our organization. So we work very, very closely with travel. And so this is something that we have ownership of and manage. And we have the expertise to manage that, especially from a compliance perspective. That immigration and tax expertise is something that we have within the organization. So it fits nicely.
So whilst the number of expats has gone down from 1,500 to say 300, I'm guessing that maybe 8 years ago, business travel wasn't sitting in mobility, and business travel, might be 30, 40, I don't know the numbers, 30, 40,000 moves a year. So, presumably it dwarfs mobility.
Yes, well, pre-pandemic numbers certainly do, Brian. I don't have the 2022 numbers, but we're certainly not anywhere close to where we were pre-pandemic. But yes, that is a much larger population. And you're right, it wasn't something that we had ownership of or governed. And so this is now something that is that we're seeing now newly in our area of responsibility. We're also seeing a bit more discussion around remote workers, and how remote workers, that sort of compliance pieces around remote workers could also be something that we may in the future have ownership of or governance over.
Okay, let's come back to remote in a moment, because I know you work remotely yourself. So we'll come back to that in a second. But Arjun, I just want to sort of bring you into the conversation. Now, you are very, very prolific on LinkedIn. So we see a lot of, really interesting thought leadership articles from you. And I think that's the reason that you got nominated to the top 100 innovators for the thought leadership you do. And one of the themes that seems to come across in your writing, well, two things. One is technology, but the other is keeping it simple and design thinking. I don't know if you could just tell us a bit about maybe who has inspired you or guided you in when you look at, at thinking that's going out there at the moment.
Sure. I think like every one of us, and also the employees that we were mobilizing, every day, I think we are using services and applications, whether you call it Uber, Zomato, DoorDash, etc., or Uberizing the apps, making it friction free. Like you can see where your order is and stuff like that. So when I see those things, I always try to apply those to the world of global mobility and see how can we bring a similar experience to the global mobility industry. So I think it comes from watching these companies innovate on a daily basis and be agile while they react to the market.
I mean that's very much my vision, and I know Benivo's vision, and I must have said it 1,000 times on the show. The thing that always gets me going is, why do I get better technology when I'm ordering a pizza than when I'm managing mobility? And you look at what the consumer companies, whether it's a delivery company for food, or whether it's an Amazon or an Uber or any of these companies, the level of technology they can deploy for what is pretty routine things, and we're only just starting to deploy that in mobility. And certainly lots of the work we do is all about tracking and predictive and analytics and all that sort of stuff. But there's whole new areas. And you posted something a little while ago, Arjun, which I found fascinating. It's certainly something that has got me very interested. I know has got our developers very interested. And for those who don't know it, I'd thoroughly recommend it. And of course, I'm talking about ChatGPT. So tell us a bit about that, because I mean, you were one of the first people to post about it in the mobility part of LinkedIn.
Sure. So I saw this interesting analogy that I'm going to use is ChatGPT is how a calculator used to be, and it's going to act instead of numbers. It's going to act for writing and coding and stuff like that. And then another analogy that I came up with is if ChatGPT or artificial intelligence is going to give you content going forward, if it's going to write you pitches, stories, songs, poetry, etc. I think the human intelligence is going to bring the context. So the old saying as it goes, if the content is the king, context is the queen. So it will definitely become a personal assistant in our day-to-day life, but I think it'll not take away the power of human intelligence, where you would have all those options, and how are you going to use and what are you going to pick as an option, it will still remain at the core of human intelligence, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we're all just seeing the beginning of it, and I don't know in the audience how many people have played around with Chat GPT. It's a free site you can use, but if you haven't, I would urge you to do that. I mean, I can just see a world where you just say, whatever, write me a core flex policy, or tell me what information I need to go when I'm moving to Shanghai, or whatever, and it will just sort of come up and write stuff for you. It's pretty cool. You've played with it quite a bit, haven't you, Arjun?
Yes, I think it's brilliant. It's more than a Google search, right? And people are making those comparisons on how Google has a catching up to do now with ChatGPT, where I even asked some cultural orientation questions on how US culture would differ from Japan. At this point, it's very generic, but I've at least tried at 50 to 100 questions. I'm going to post my favorites pretty soon. I even asked it for fun, asked to come up with fancy global mobility titles, asked it to write vision statements for global mobility. I tried different stuff. I think for generative AI, it's pretty brilliant. It's pretty slick. There's a lot of news around Microsoft investing $10 billion into that and integrating. By the way, I'm not evangelizing ChatGPT, but I'm just excited at the possibilities that if ChatGPT gets integrated with your Microsoft applications, for you to draft 5 emails to the employee and keep it ready for your review, it's like your personal digital assistants. What Iron Man had, Jarvis doing the stuff for, keeping things ready, I guess, for you to review.
Okay, and I see Ashley's put up there. It's extremely impressive. It certainly is, Ashley. As I said, we'll move on the conversation because we're not evangelizing about ChatGPT, or maybe we are. We don't intend to be. Let's move on. I'll go back to you, Tessa. Now, we've talked a bit about innovation, and what makes a person stand out as a true innovator? Because I think everybody can have ideas, but there's something more to actually be the person. We actually did a little poll on this. I'll just put it up here. And the question we asked is, what is the single most important personal quality that makes someone stand out as a true innovator at work? And to make it easier for you, Tessa, I'll give you 4 choices, and I'll give the audience 4 choices. Thinking outside the box, i.e. having the idea in the first place, strong commercial acumen, charisma and leadership, or perseverance and commitment. Now, I know it's going to be all of those, but which is the one that is the single most important of them all?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it's the perseverance and commitment. I mean, I think you need a good idea. Without a good idea and a place to start, without vision, without some outside of the box thinking, you don't have anything. You don't, right? But if you don't persevere and you don't push and you don't do, then you're just a person with a good idea. And ultimately it may never see the light of day. So I feel like it's that perseverance and commitment. Change is hard. And getting people to see your vision and getting that buy-in and getting people to join you, I think takes work. And I think that's the differentiator.
Okay, and Arjun, from your point of view, actually, I know you're both sort of talking about core flex at the moment, but Arjun, you've been doing quite a bit of work on that recently. And has that been something that you managed to get buy-in to make the changes? Tell us a bit about how you innovate something like that, because core flex, I think, is one of the most interesting innovations that we're seeing at the moment in our industry.
It is. And while we design our core flex, there are different approaches, right? You hear points approach, there is lump sum, there is managed cap, etc. Regardless of the practice, I think what everyone in the industry is navigating is, how do you make something consistent, standardized, but also provide enough flexibility for unique scenarios? That's where how you're going to create the list of the whole flex is, I think, important. Whether you're looking at the frequent exception requests or whatever to come up with your list of flexible items. So all that to say, we have just sort of got alignment with our senior leadership on our core flex philosophy and methodology, which we are going to launch at the end of this quarter one. So really excited about it. It wasn't straightforward. It did challenge us, but we have a fantastic team that beat everything that we proposed to make sure it was sound once it'll be applied versus just in theory.
Okay, so I mean, obviously it's early days, but is Core Flex something that you'd recommend to other people who might be watching in?
I think so, absolutely. I think this is a cliched statement, right? Like one size fits all approach is no longer the norm. So definitely, I think if you can balance the core, like what percentage of your program is core versus what percentage you allow flexibility, and who does the flexibility lie with? Is it global mobility that's recommending or prescribing what flexibility the employee is going to have, or are you going to give autonomy to the business, or is the autonomy with the employee to choose what they want to personalize the experience?
Yeah, because I suppose on one end of the scale, if it's the corporate flexing for different people, then that's still quite paternalistic, to use a word, but you're just flexing it to manage your budget. Whereas on the other hand, you go the other way, you're going right down to the almost like the cafeteria system, where you're saying, here's a bunch of cash or a number of points, and you can spend them as you want. And whereabouts on that continuum are you ending up?
So I think we have set some guardrails where I think at the core of it, employee has the flexibility to play within a certain budget to use that budget for the needs that are personal to them or unique, that is not covered anywhere in the relocation. So I think more of that judgment and discretion is left with the employee, obviously within a certain guardrails of the budget that can be recommended by the business, I guess. Yep.
Yeah. Lovely comment there from Ellie Sullivan. One size fits no one. So absolutely. So forget one size fits all. One size fits no one. So Tessa, from your point of view, what's on your agenda for 23?
Oh gosh, lots of things. Like I mentioned, we're rolling out our smart trip enterprise wide. So that is a large initiative. We also have a policy refresh that we have been working through, also with a basis of core flex. It's
I love that term, policy refresh.
yes.
That could mean like a big change or tweaks, or is
yeah,
this
no, it's a big change. It's a big change. Yeah, it's
I would expect nothing less of one of our top 100 innovators. So tell us about the big changes coming.
So we're yeah, I mean, again, we've had very, very traditional programs for a long time. Ford has a very long-standing program, and so we want to be able to offer other options to the business, and we also want to improve our employee experience. We want there to be that flexibility so that their experience is better, so that we are also being more inclusive and more equitable. And so that this model is interesting for us. It is heavy on core, so maybe we want to call it a care flex, which is a term that I've heard recently.
Okay, I like that, care flex.
Yeah, it's heavy on core, so it's not just covering compliance. It does cover a good bit more, and then the flex elements is where you are afforded that customization, that opportunity to really make it yours, to make it what's going to work best for you and your family. So we're excited about it, and that's something that we're going to work through. We have developed up to this point some iterations, some modeling. We're going to pilot here in the first part of this year and allow our stakeholders to poke holes in it, try it out, kick the tires, if you will. And then we'll see about launching it in the second half of this year. Again, integrating technology, making sure that we've got a good user experience. maybe looking to launch it near the end of the year or possibly into 24.
And that will be with your 300 or so expats, or will it be for new populations?
This would be for any sort of international movement. So this is going to cover those traditional sorts of temporary, but also for permanent, looking for opportunities to integrate some new reasons to be moving internationally. Right now, we have an opportunity for someone to raise their hand and have a permanent international one-way move based on personal request. It's an employee-driven sort of volunteer. Well, maybe we're going to introduce also something that looks like a temporary volunteer program. That's not something we have today, and something that the business asks about. So from a talent retention perspective, it might be something that we are looking to offer in the future.
And what's driving this? Is it being driven by talent retention, or is it being driven by cost control?
So yes. So it's many drivers. We are solutioning for our customers. So we hear what our customer. We went out to the customers. We collected voice of the customer a couple of different times, and are designing something that we believe is going to be best for our customers, for the business units that are looking to move people internationally. But it's also what we understand from an employee, trying to be customer centric, trying to design with the customer in mind, and of course also keeping in mind that we want to ensure that we are aligning ourselves with our corporate DE&I goals.
You mentioned DE&I, and in fact, we've got a show on that another show on that again in a couple of weeks' time. But I know you said when we were chatting earlier that you're doing some quite innovative stuff around DEI in terms of the initial sort of the look-see visits that people go on. So tell us a bit about that, because I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah, so I feel like the things that we are recommending are small. They're not large, and yet I think that they make a pretty significant impact. So we do have for certain policies or for certain move types, we have a pre-trip, which is an opportunity for the employee to go into the host location and manage potentially to secure housing or open a bank account or enroll their children in school. And this has traditionally been employee and spouse, very traditional. And so we're thinking that maybe this should just be employee plus one. Take your grandmother if you like, take your neighbor, take a friend, or if you're single, we never allowed you to take anyone. We just said it's just.
I love that, because I mean, I think a lot of companies maybe they're beyond employee plus spouse, but they might be employee plus the person who is going with them, whether it's a partner, not
Why?
necessarily.
It doesn't have to be.
I know, but
right?
I think this is lovely. What you're saying is you can take anybody. You can take your next door neighbor if you want. Just take anybody who can help you make that decision.
Yeah, whatever's going to work best for you and your family. And if you are single and don't have a spouse, traditionally we don't allow you to take anyone. So now we're going to allow you to do that. So I think that it's these things that are not necessarily, adding cost or significant cost, but make, I think, a big difference.
I'd love to ask the audience what other companies do. We've got a comment here from Trish McDonald, who from Memories with Westinghouse, and Trish says, "Agree, Tessa. Why do we care? Do what works for you."
Exactly right. And we know that there are multi-generational households, very common in certain places of the world, and maybe that's we should be looking at this. We should be thinking about trying to help the employee to make the experience the best for them, meet them where they are, help them to solve for their own personal situation wherever we can. We can't always manage for everything, but we should certainly try.
Okay, and let me bring Arjun back into the conversation. Arjun, what's on your agenda for 23? You know, if you're going to look at your policy in, say, 12 months' time, what's going to be different to how it is today?
A lot of things on the agenda, Brian. But with the policy, I think it's going to be more inclusive, more flexible to unique circumstances. It's heading in the direction of more of a guidance versus governance. We want to guide and help the business with optionality so that they can pick which package fits best for the intent of the assignment. So that's from the policy, which will be supplemented with the technology solutions decision trees for which policy and package is appropriate, hopefully integrated with technology. One other cool thing that we are trying, and I don't know how many in the industry have gone this route, is personally at Baker Hughes, like within the global mobility team, we want to democratize tools to the business where global mobility is not adding like huge value. So take cost estimates, for example. We want to put that in the hands of the business rather than GM running them. So for instance, if you look at an insurance market, like when was the time we last called an insurance agent to give us a quote versus you go on the website and just, estimate which policy is going to work for you. So same philosophy we want to apply for cost estimate and cut down the time that it takes to estimate packages and policies. Obviously GM is available, but we're going to try some of that democratization of tools, data, reports, etc.
So people can do their own cost estimates.
Yes, not to transfer the burden, but to empower them with the tools when they need it, versus them having to wait a week to get the cost estimate. You run all the packages. We are going to enable you with the technology and all the scenarios that you would need.
Okay. I have to say, otherwise I'll get shot by somebody, just to say that the Benivo technology does instant tax cost estimates using Vialto's tax logic. So certainly the question of waiting a week, shouldn't be out there at the moment.
I mean, we have a pretty, the week is not for how long it takes to run a cost estimate, but it so happens that they're running through several scenarios. So there is a lot of back and forth versus why not put the tool in the hands of the customer?
So people can do multiple scenarios. Yeah, that's really cool. We're coming to the close of our time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring on the two J's, Julia and Julie, and also bring on back onto stage Tally. So the whole gang is there. Julie, this has been your very first show. Hopefully you've heard some great innovation there from the team. Any comments you'd like to make that you've been thinking whilst you've been watching them backstage?
No, but I love the idea of considering the extended family. I think that's great because there's so many different demographics that we see nowadays where it's not just the core family that's important.
Absolutely. And Julia?
Well, I just love what Ellie Sullivan said, in commenting on what she'd heard about one size fits no one. I think that's that really resonated with me. Okay, so the prize for comment of the day goes to Ellie Sullivan. That's one for you to take home. We love your, and also to Tess for saying small things can make huge impacts. I actually wrote that down. I thought that was quite good. And obviously, Arjun, everything you said was so great as well.
Absolutely, it's been a fabulous show. We're going to be back next week, so everybody, please mark your diary. Make sure you're with us next week when we're going to be talking about cost optimization and what companies are doing to control cost and indeed get the most value out of their programs next week. So thank you all. Our hour is up, and all that really remains is for me to say goodbye to our wonderful guests, to Tessa and to Arjun, to Julia, and for the first time to Julie, and of course to the wonderful Tally who puts everything together. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you again next week.